So, the X-Men movies are a mixed bag, right? I think that they peaked at First Class, the revisionist history of America with mutants was a really fun, exciting film, and I just think that it really got back to what X-Men are and should be, which is character drama. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Days of Future Past when it came out, but I would have much rather gotten direct sequels to First Class, continuing that exploration of X-Men through history. And that's what I'm going to pitch right now. I'm going to pitch 3 movies that will replace the 3 that existed and will each be taking place in a different decade, 70s, 80s, and 90s, which will bridge the gap between First Class and the original film, which takes place in the early 2000s. Can I do it? Will this video be a failure? You tell me at the end. I'm Greg, and this is my pitch for First Class sequels. Let's do this. So we're going to open this movie on a scene in the Vietnam War where a group of soldiers is being ambushed by enemies, and the only thing that saves them is the fact that Tempest and Riptide show up and get rid of the enemy soldiers. The American soldiers are very scared, very uncomfortable, and they flee. We find out the reason why these characters showed up to save these soldiers wasn't for them, but because they wanted to get Toad, who is a teenager in the army here, and rescue him. I know the Vietnam War was something that Matthew Vaughn wanted to touch on in sequels, and we get a bit of that in Days of Future Past or Apocalypse, whichever one it was. Anyways, whichever one that happens in, that's not happening. We're getting this instead, and it'll come further into play later. So I'm going to steal the assassination attempt on Nixon from Days of Future Past, but I'm going to do it in a different way. For one, it's going to be Magneto's plan to do so, and he's trying to make a big show of it. He's not going to succeed in the big grand spectacle because we are still trying to build back to the original films where mutants are a little more in the shadows, but that's what he's aiming for, a big moment that everyone can see as the major coming out of mutants to the public. But before we get on that, we should check in on the X-Men. Charles is not doing great after his friends abandoning him in the last one and losing the legs thing, where he was paralyzed. So that leads to him being out of the picture for the first half of the film because he's in his feelings. Not in a I'm taking a drug that suppresses my powers but gives me legs kind of way, because that's not something I think is a great story arc. Though I get their whole it's a metaphor for drugs thing. I don't like that. I think that he can just have feelings. He can just be depressed. The rest of the X-Men aren't really doing well without Charles. There's a bit of a power vacuum without him leading, and no one's really getting along anymore. This will lead to them running headfirst into a conflict that they shouldn't be getting into, and Havoc ends up dying in the process. With his last breaths, he whispers something about them needing to check in on his brother, which will set up Cyclops for the future movies. That is the defining moment that'll set Charles straight for the rest of the movie, making him realize that the people he cares about that are still with him need him. They can't do it on their own. They're better as a cohesive team. Charles is going to try to negotiate with Eric, but it's not going to work. Eric views the mistreatment that Toad faced in the army as just a furthering of the fact that humans haven't evolved and become more accepting since Eric was a child himself. So now Charles has to win. He's going to use his powers on the other members of the Brotherhood so that way he can find out Magneto's plan. The X-Men intervene and are able to stop the assassination without the world knowing that it happened. There will, however, be Secret Service footage that captures Magneto in the act, and that will set up what happens in the... There's this comic book from the 80s called The Trial of Magneto where, Magneto is on trial, and I don't know if that would make a good or easy translation directly to the screen, But I like that title. It's very evocative, and it's going to be the inspiration for the story I'm telling here. So we've got a new class of mutants. It's Cyclops, Jean, Storm, and they're being taught by Professor X and Beast, who is now serving as a teacher. Mystique and Toad show up at the mansion looking for help. Their hideout was attacked by the military, and this could even be like the opening action sequence of the film if you want to start it off with a bang. The military show up and they start taking prisoners and maybe killing other members of the Brotherhood, and they're trying to capture Magneto, and they're very obviously equipped to deal with these exact mutants. They have countermeasures for Tempest and Riptide's powers, for example. They know what they're doing, and they're doing it. Charles doesn't want to send the kids in on a crazy mission like this because they're young and unequipped, but Mystique talks them into doing it. Cyclops is very angsty about this whole thing because he blames Magneto for the death of his brother, and he's only really going because he has hard eyes for Jean and wants to keep her safe. So we cut to Magneto, and he is in an early version of that no-metal prison we see in other movies, and he is demanding to be put on a trial with a jury of his mutant peers. Specifically, his mutant peers. He does not consider humans to be his peers. But they don't go for that. They have other plans. This operation is being led by a young William Stryker, who decides, you know what? We should probably do some experiments on him. That's fun. That never goes horribly wrong. The X-Men end up breaking into the compound, and they'll probably find some sort of hints towards Weapon X, but they're not going to run into Wolverine because I like the idea of him not showing up until he's introduced in the original film. This is about the origins of characters before him, but we can, of course, it's a movie. We're going to sprinkle it with Easter eggs because people love Easter eggs. And this way we avoid more Wolverine because this franchise really leans on him way too much. But eventually we do get them breaking Magneto out, and we get some great character drama between Cyclops and Magneto that gets broken up by Charles, of course, because he sees both sides. He cherishes his friendship with Eric, even though they are on opposite sides of the battle. That is the crux of their characters. We're going to use that. We end up with both sides going in their own direction, laying the groundwork for the drama of the future for them, but past for us films. But Magneto and his team are going to take a back seat because we're going to do something different in the... I did not read a lot of comics as a kid, but one of the ones I did was an X-Men one about the Morlocks. And they've kind of always stuck with me, and especially having those early 2000s movies that are very grounded and low-key comparative to how superhero films are now. It's always been something that I've wanted to be in these X-Men movies, which, agree or disagree with me, I think these movies work better when they are smaller, more grounded films. I know in the comics they go into space and have all these crazy huge adventures, but to me, I prefer, especially in the Fox version of this universe, seeing a smaller, more contained story. What Marvel does with them could work very different and could be a great take on like the alien extravaganza stuff. But for me, with the Fox movies, I think they work better grounded. So that's why the last film in my series that I'm pitching isn't some huge grandiose adventure, but a character drama. Because that's kind of my whole thing here, is on this channel saying we need more character drama and more intimate moments in our blockbusters. Anyways, ramble aside, let's pitch. Part of what I think will also make the Morlocks a good story isn't just the themes that are built into them of, persecution and being isolated from society that, is the point of a good X-Men story. But it also gives us a good chance to showcase Storm as a character, because she's always been sort of a supporting player in the movies. It'll really be a good way to show that she has learned a lot from Xavier, but she isn't just another version of him. She's doing her own thing and is a leader in her own way. And the movie itself will be building up the momentum of them discovering the Morlocks and meeting them and understanding them and seeing the pain and rage that these characters have, and how Callisto is trying to, just fuck shit up. Her goal is to essentially like throw a riot or some kind of big movement that could potentially injure and kill a lot of not just the humans but the Morlocks themselves. And because of that, we end up with the scene where Storm challenges her for leadership. That's going to be the climax of the film, an emotional battle between two characters. Not a war, not blue lasers shooting into the sky, nothing like that. Just characters who have different beliefs on what's best for their people figuring it out with fists, because it's still an action movie. It'll end with Storm leaving the X-Men, but leaving it open that she will return, so that way it's not weird that she's there in the original X-Men, because that is going to be the next movie in this. It will end with her just saying like, hey, I'll be back. I just got to help these people. And I think that would work really well, personally. There could even be a scene like before the fight where she like gives herself that cool mohawk haircut as like a symbol of her trying to become more like the punk rock Morlocks that we'll have in the movie. And then there could even be like, like a end credit scene, and there she is, hair's growing back out, returning to the mansion, just to bookend things nicely. We're also going to get a subplot with Cyclops and Jean dealing with the early stages of their relationship, as well as transitioning from student to teacher. And then we have Professor X's story, where he's worried about the future of mutant kind, seeing the unrest and feeling that he is only one man and the pressures of trying to help everyone is too much for him. That gets resolved nicely where after Storm does her thing and shows that there is a way of peace to the Morlocks, a flood of new students coming to the school, bringing life to a building that had been, in the prior films, fairly barren. You don't see a lot of students in these movies leading up to this, because it's been difficult for them, and that's something that will finally come to a head and allow them to prosper. And that's not something Professor X would have expected, because his whole thing was a little too much, let's keep it on the down low, because when we didn't, I got paralyzed and we lost Mystique and all that. So his plot throughout these movies is one of, we have to hide ourselves, but that isn't good for building the community. And it's Storm's plotline that helps connect all that together and bring everything into a tight little bow at the end. That's all I got for this. I hope it made sense. I hope you enjoyed it. And I would love to get some feedback. I try to answer comments when I can, so leave them down below. Hit the sub if you want to get more content from me. Share it with your friends if you think they would like it too. I always feel weird asking for this stuff at the end of videos, but the algorithm wants engagement, so I'm going to try and feed the algorithm, because I would love to get this channel a bit bigger. I enjoy doing this. I'd love if more people got to see it and hopefully enjoy it as well. Anyways, that's enough from me. Have a good one.